Radu, and this week we're going to take a look at one of the Beatles projects which I believe was the most significant one post their breakup, and that is the Beatles Anthology. This is the last big Beatles project that George Harrison also took a part of after the death of John Lennon and before the death of Harrison himself, of course. And the things that we're going to be looking at today are the three pieces of content that came out of this whole project, which are the documentary TV series, the 3 albums that were released in the mid-90s, and the Beatles Anthology Book. Now, I believe most Beatles fans are super aware of what happened during the production of Anthology, so we're not going to go through a history lesson today. We're going to touch upon a few points, but rather we're just going to focus on the 3 pieces of content that I have in front of me. And if you are interested to see if these stood the test of time 20, 25, 30 years later, stick around. Now, I said we're not going to spend too much time on history, but we have to talk a little bit about the origins of Anthology, because it really did not start in the 90s when it was actually produced, but rather the seeds of it were planted even back in 1970 when Neil Aspinall, Beatles' all-time collaborator, started gathering footage and recordings of them, not only from the UK but also from around the world where they had been to, and intended to put together a sort of career-spanning documentary for the group. That would be called Long and Winding Road. He did actually manage to do that, so he managed to have a rough cut of a documentary film. I think he mentions also in the documentaries, the Anthology documentaries actually, in the interviews, it was about 1 hour 45 minutes long. That was in 1971, but that really never saw the light of day. And then about 10 years later, before he died, John Lennon had mentioned apparently that he was going to reunite with the Beatles for a sort of a get-together and maybe a mini concert or whatever, something that in which they would play together, and that there was an intention for that representation to be actually sort of the closure for that intended documentary. But of course, John Lennon died soon after that, and obviously that was completely left aside. Now, the plans for this were restarted in 1992, and later on, the name of the project was changed from The Long and Winding Road to Anthology. Initially, I think Anthology was just a working title, but it just stuck. Also because George Harrison did not like the title The Long and Winding Road, which he felt like it was just the name of the Paul McCartney song, and he didn't want this project to have that name. But yeah, it was restarted in 1992, and actually a rough cut or a cut with the documentary with the interviews was ready by 1993, but that cut had apparently a lot more interview sequences than the final one that we got to see had. Subsequently, this was intertwined more with sequences from their past experiences as the Beatles, with sequences from videos that they had filmed, concerts, other TV appearances, and so on and so forth. Now, the documentary first aired in the US on ABC between the 13th and the 23rd of November of 1995, and then a few days later it started airing also in the UK on ITV, and it aired in 8 episodes, the last one being the end of December of 1995. Subsequently, the documentary was released on home video, but initially only on, of course, VHS and Laserdisc in 1996. This DVD release that we're going to be looking at today was actually released quite a few years later in 2003. The Anthology Albums started to be released as of November 1995, the first one. Then the second one came in March 1996, and the third one in October of 1996. And these albums were released on CD, as you can see, but also on vinyl and cassette. Now, the albums contained material that the Beatles had recorded as early as 1958, at least for the first one. So this one contained material from between 1958 to 1964. Then the second one contained material recorded between 1965 and 67. And the last one contained the last 3 years of the Beatles as a group, 1968 to 1970. Now, both the albums and the documentary had a great deal of success financially, commercially, critically. The albums, I think, went multiple times platinum, and so this obviously warranted for the documentary to be re-released on home video in 2003 on the DVD, but also for the book to be released in 2000 in October. Now, I was thinking of how to start the showing of the items, whether I should do it chronologically, but that would mean that I would have to start with the CDs, continue with the book, and end with the DVDs because they were released last in 2003. But I decided to just look at the elements actually in the order of how they were released as content, right? Because the documentary came first and then the albums right after, and the book a few years later. So we're going to start with the DVDs for now. Now, I got this a few months ago, obviously secondhand, so this is not being produced. We're going to talk about that actually in a little while. I got it, of course, off of the internet. For a set of DVDs built in 2003, this still looks excellent, except for this box that has this bent corner here. I don't mind it that much. It could have been from shipping initially or a little bit later. Maybe it wasn't stored properly, but the rest of the box is in excellent shape. 20 years later, it looks perfect. I'm going to just take the discs out so that we can open them up and just tell you what's on them. So we do have 4 discs which contain the actual TV documentary in 8 episodes, 2 episodes per disc. These are the 4 discs, each of them in its own case, of course, each of them containing a part of the overall anthology poster designed by Klaus Voormann, the Beatles friend, who designed also the cover for Revolver, of course. He worked on this. And if you put them side by side, I'm going to show this to you in like B footage that was going to roll on the screen while I'm talking. If you put them side by side, you can actually build the poster. And this is the case also for the CDs, and it's the case also for the vinyl records as well, and I think also the cassettes. Now, each disc contains, like I said, 2 episodes. What is also nice, and I'm going to open this and show the discs to you, they are sort of classical Apple label discs, DVDs or CDs from that period, right? What each disc contains, also aside from the disc, which is a nice addition, is a small leaflet. I wouldn't call it a booklet, it's a leaflet, which contains, it still has the picture of the front of the disc, so even these leaflets, if you put them side by side, you will form the poster. But it also contains the contents of the disc in the sense that not only the episodes 1 and 2, but also kind of chapters or points of interest from each episode, which is quite nice because you can actually see the progression of the Beatles through their career and their different periods by looking at that as well, and you kind of know very well what you will find in each episode. And at the same time, there are some notes by Derek Taylor on each disc. Well, they're not on the disc specifically, but on the period, the Beatles period, and you can see them here, right? This is for disc 1. You have July 1940 to March 1963, and you have the notes here by Derek Taylor, and then March 63 to February 64 here, and the notes. And each of them will also have a quote, a different quote from one of the Beatles assigned to each side, right? Which is I think it's a nice touch. It's thinking about what DVD releases were back in 2003. This seems pretty thoughtful even for today, right? Now, this goes on, like I said, for all of the 4 discs with the episodes. All of them have this. I'm not going to open all of them to show them, but I'm going to open the one with the special features. Now, this one, as you can see, contains the entire, let's say, full poster, anthology poster on the front. The duration of the disc is 81 minutes. So overall, I think if we are looking at the other discs as well, again, we have, each of them is over 140 minutes. So 2 of them are 151, 155. 2 of them, the other 2 are 144, 143 minutes. So that is almost 600 minutes of documentary. But if you include also this, it kind of goes on 600 minutes. So this has almost an hour and a half, hour 20 minutes of content. And again, the disc, as you can see, this is the half Apple, but it's quite standard for Apple releases, on CD or DVD as of the 90s, basically. Here you also have the same leaflet as you have it for the others, but this one, of course, includes the contents of the Anthology Special Features DVD. In the middle, you no longer have those notes by Derek Taylor, but rather a collage of pictures. And I'm going to go through the special features so that you kind of know what to expect if you buy this, right? So first of all, there's a couple of documentaries or mini documentaries, I think maybe featurette. One is called Recollections, June 1994. It's basically the three remaining Beatles being together in George's house and discussing different topics from their youth, talking about Elvis Presley. And then they have a short jam session that you can see and watch with a few tracks that they are jamming to. Baby, What You Want Me to Do, Raunchy, Thinking of Linking, Blue Moon of Kentucky, and then later on they'll be jamming Ain't She Sweet on ukuleles on George's lawn. There's quite a few nice moments there. There's a couple of moments that I also feel George was not super happy to be there. I think it may seem that he's just not into jamming with Paul especially, but really I think maybe he was just like tired, and I think on the other hand he would probably have a better time if the cameras were not on them all the time. But he always kind of started at some point in his career, in his life, he kind of started to resent the way that the press cameras were on them all the time. Then the next one, or actually the next two, I would say, there are some short documentaries on how the Anthology albums were built, and also the first one is called Compiling the Anthology Albums, actually, and you have Paul, George and Ringo and George Martin discussing about how they chose the tracks to be included on Anthology 1, 2 and 3. And you also, at the end, there's a nice moment with George Martin sharing with the public and clearly being quite emotional about it, the first take of one of the Beatles' greatest productions, A Day in the Life. And then you have another featurette called Back at Abbey Road from May 1995, and you again going to see the three Beatles along with George Martin, but this time in the studio, going through some of the takes for a few of their songs, respectively Golden Slumbers, I'm Only Sleeping, and Tomorrow Never Knows. And they're kind of playing around with with the equalizer on the tracks and kind of selecting pieces of them and listening and commenting on them. It's a nice little featurette. You will have then a mini documentary on recording the new songs that were included on Anthology 1 and Anthology 2, respectively, Free as a Bird and Real Love. And there you have Paul, George and Ringo again, but also Jeff Lynne in interviews talking about how they found the songs, how they recorded them, how they produced them, and so on. You'll have another featurette with the production team of the documentary and of the project. You'll get to see different people who were involved, from the director and others, and telling about their experience. And then you have a making of the Free as a Bird video, and you also have the Real Love video in full. So a decent collection of special features. Again, this was released back in 2003. That's over 20 years ago, and this is, I think it still stands as a good sort of collector's box set of the Anthology documentary. Now, aside for the DVDs, on their front covers, if they put them together, you get the poster. The poster is also sort of displayed across the box, starting from here. If you roll the box, you see it continue on the spines of the DVDs, right? So you're starting here, and then you just go around and you can see, the poster continues on the spines, and then it goes to the back. I like that they were consistent when it came to the packaging and appearance of all of these releases. To be honest, given that this documentary is currently not on streaming services and it wasn't any more recent release, I would recommend to anyone that can to get their hands on it if they don't have it, until we will have a Blu-ray release, which I'm hoping and thinking that we will probably have in the future. This is the only way to own this, aside from, of course, VHS and Laserdisc, but very few people still have a possibility to play those. And I think it's the most complete edition that you could get from those. So yeah, it's something that I would definitely recommend if people don't have it to try and get it, because it's really, really nice. And it's a pretty good documentary, I think. Now, I was mentioning Blu-ray. So obviously this doesn't have, and I said this, it doesn't have a Blu-ray release yet. but it's something, I think it's a piece of Beatles product that actually screams for a Blu-ray release, full HD or even a 4K one, if they can do a 4K restoration. And I think they can, because I saw some of the images that were definitely from the filming sessions for the Anthology project that were included in Peter Jackson's video for Now and Then, which was released in last autumn. So definitely those images look really good. So it looks like they could actually restore the picture for all of this documentary and all of the special features, and maybe add new special features and add them to a proper release on Blu-ray. Now, the albums, as I mentioned, were released on CD, but also on vinyl and cassette. The vinyl, I think they are triple disc albums, and these ones are double disc albums. And I have to say that, the collection of tracks on them really paints a very good picture of the Beatles' career from their very early beginnings and until they broke up in 1970. But of course does it through alternate takes, versions of different songs that they had recorded, and some studio chatter here and there, some recordings from their earlier career that potentially never made it officially to the market. Some that did, like for instance the Tony Sheridan ones obviously had been released before, but a lot of the elements that they had put on these had never been released until then officially. They had been released or presented to some fans via bootleg recordings, but obviously those would never have had the best level of quality, or at least some of them probably didn't. So then what they released on this anthology was in a very big part quite unique to the average Beatle fan. At the same time, the first two of them, of course, included new songs, right? The first anthology included Free as a Bird, and the second anthology included Real Love. The story of this, I think everybody knows so far, and it's been told so many times. I mentioned it also in the video where I unboxed the new Red and Blue albums last autumn, along with discussing the new song Now and Then. But just to reiterate, when they started working on this project, Paul McCartney had talked to Yoko Ono, asking her, and this was potentially right after the induction of John Lennon in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, where they both participated. He had asked her if she had any work of John's that was left unfinished or unpublished at home that she could send them, that they could work with to create some new Beatles music. And she sent them a cassette tape that John had recorded on his own, on his piano and singing, with a few songs, among which were Free as a Bird, Real Love, and what would become Now and Then. At that point, they took those, and they did manage to do, I think, a pretty good job along with Jeff Lynne to, take those tapes, which were not super good quality audio-wise, with John and his piano and the TV in the background on the same track, basically, and actually were able to create what I think were pretty good songs, Free as a Bird and Real Love, and that was like the early 90s, right? And of course, Now and Then, which they started working on actually, and was supposed to be on Anthology 3, but George wanted to stop working on it because he didn't think that it was either good enough or they were going anywhere with it. So they kind of shelved that, but now, more recently, as you know, Paul McCartney with Ringo Starr and Giles Martin worked on it again and released it last year. To me, I will say it again, Now and Then would have been a better fit for a really released anthology series. I think, again, they could have done the Blu-ray of the documentary, and they could have re-released these albums, maybe with some better quality sound at some places, or add some bonus tracks and add Now and Then on the third one. They chose to do it with the Red and Blue. Makes sense from a certain perspective, so it's just good that we have it. But yeah, the first two anthologies, aside from all of the recordings on them, included these two new songs. The third one, though, is the one that actually stuck with me the longest, even from the 90s, because I wasn't super aware of Anthology, in the mid-90s in Romania. I'm pretty sure that there were some people in Romania that knew about it, that had bought it, but I wasn't really super aware. I don't remember seeing the documentary on TV. I don't remember seeing the book on any shelves, at least in my hometown. But the CDs I did see, or at least Anthology 3, and this is another story that I told on the channel before last Christmas, which I will share in the description as well, on how I got into the Beatles. And when I was talking about in the mid-90s, or actually towards the end of the night, like 96, 97, after the mid-90s, I managed to get my hands on Beatles albums, but the way that I did it was because a guy who had CDs and was selling CDs was nice enough to make copies on cassette for me. And I got Please Please Me, and I got Revolver, and I got some selections of unofficial compilations and so on. What I also got was the actual a cassette with the second disc of this third anthology set. And I remember it because when I was looking through his CD collection that he was selling with the Beatles, and I was looking for pieces that I would maybe want him to put on cassette for me, I saw Let It Be, and I wanted to have the song. I knew it from years before, but I didn't have the album. And at that point, I didn't really know all of their discography, right? And actually, I wasn't really able to identify that maybe I should find the Let It Be album instead. But I found Let It Be on this. I didn't even know that it was an alternate take or anything. I just saw it and I said, okay, copy this for me so I can have Let It Be. And because I was listening to this so much and listening to Let It Be specifically, I became also very impressed, and I started to love I, Me, Mine, which is not a very popular Beatles song or George Harrison song, but I really, really love it. I think the lyrics are great. I think it is so simple, but yet, you know, it adds so much complexity. As musically is special, right? It's different than whatever they were producing. So I really, really loved I, Me, Mine, and I was happy to have this piece of Anthology. And that's when I kind of understood what Anthology actually was, right? So years later, I knew what I was getting myself into. Now, I mentioned that, you know, they are all covering different periods. This is covering a period from 1958 up to 1964. And it has a lot of their early recordings, like from the Decca auditions and from the recording with Lonnie Sheridan and so on. It has Free as a Bird as an addition, of course. But then it goes on up until the end of Beatles for Sale as an album. The second one, which was released, is the first one that was released in 1996, has, as I said, as a period, it covers the years between 1965 to 1967. It starts with Real Love, which is the new song, but then it continues with songs from singles or from the albums, you know, starting with Help, basically, and going up to a Magical Mystery Tour. But if we consider the Magical Mystery Tour as the US album, right, which included the songs from the Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane single, for instance, and so on. But it does end with an early take of Across the Universe, right, which in the end, as an album, it would have been released a few years later. But yeah, they include an early take of that on this one, which is really interesting to hear. And the last one that I was talking about earlier, which was released in October 1996, it contains the period between 1968 and 1970. It starts with elements from the White Album, and of course it ends with elements from Abbey Road. What's interesting also was that in the second part of the second disc, they're kind of mixing up together songs from, or you know, putting them side by side, songs from Let It Be and Abbey Road, sort of alternating them. In the end, given the way that they were working chronologically, it probably would have made sense to just put the sort of the Let It Be tracks and then put the Abbey Road ones together, but they're kind of mixing them up, which is, I guess, an interesting approach. But what is fitting is that they do end with the end. Now, another couple of things about these albums. I really, really loved the way that they were packaged, and thankfully, even today, I think if you buy them, they're still packaged the same. I at some point thought that maybe they had moved on to digipacks as well, but apparently they haven't. They're still using these fat boxes, as they were called, and I really like them with the white, you know, plastic parts as well, and the way that they are built. You know, some of them, like this one, kind of yellowed out due to time passing, right? But I really like that. I feel like it gives it like a vintage vibe, right? And I feel like these were owned by somebody and played. And at the same time, all of these that I got in the second hand as well. So these are actual original versions from the 90s, produced in Holland. You can see the discs. This one also, the past owner had, you know, put some marks on it with a marker. But as you can see, again, the sort of standard Apple label from the 90s. and this one with the half apple, the second disc. And all of these are kind of the same, right? We can open them all up and you can see the discs as well. Oh. One thing, when I bought these, at least one of these, I had to replace pieces of the fat box because these disc holders had shattered. But you see, oh, the book. Now all of these have these booklets, like this one, quite hefty booklets, they're quite thick. What they are actually showing are details about each track that they included on each disc. And of course some pictures. Pretty good companions to these albums. In terms of sound, I'm pretty happy with how these sound, right? Even of course the circumstances. It is said, I mean, George Martin actually stated that himself during the documentary at some point. He mentioned that he had worked and wanted to work on selecting the tracks that they wanted to put on the albums and kind of producing them for the album using equipment that was fully analog, the way that he was using it back in the 60s when he was actually producing the songs with the Beatles. And he did that. He requested EMI to give him a board that he could work on that was an original one from that period. And so basically he says that everything that is put on here, at least in terms of the songs that they took from their collection, were done fully analog, and then they were produced for the album also fully analog. And he mentions this actually, up until the last moment when they put it on the CD, it's all analog. I'm not sure if this means also that the vinyl pressings are pressed with analog, 100% analog sources that were not digitized at all. There are discussions about this I saw on forums, but I think based on what he said, you could, I think, safely assume that the discs, the vinyl records are also analog. Now, regarding the vinyl, there have been some discussions on the quality of some of the pressings of this. They're not super easy to find either because they are not being pressed anymore as far as I know. So if you want to buy them, you're usually buying copies from years back. And there are people who have complained about some of the pressings, not all of them, but some of the pressings, I think for Anthology 3, talking about them being too low in volume and that the surface noise of the record at some point is really noticeable. So yeah, I'm not sure. I'll probably try to get them on vinyl as well, just to see how they sound, but I'll need to find like a good deal to get them, I think. But anyway, these are the albums, Anthology 1, 2 and 3. Worth owning. The CD version is quite good. I'm pretty happy with it, and especially these 1990s copies that made it very well until 2024 are quite good to have. Now, on with the last part of the collection, the Anthology Book by the Beatles. The Beatles story told for the first time in their own words and pictures, as it says on the back. I will show you. Now, this book, you can see it's quite a big book. It has a few kilograms. I got this also secondhand, and it was brought to me by a friend on her airplane luggage last year. I got it from the US. I bought it from Amazon, but it was from a third-party store that sells through Amazon. I'm pretty happy with the condition of it. The outer sleeve, this is a hardcover. There was also I think there was also a paperback version of this. But anyway, this is a hardcover version, which, like I said, it's quite heavy. Released in 2000. This has this outer paper sleeve, which most hardcover books or books like these have, with this very decent, nice silver color. Of course, with the full poster of Anthology on the front. On the back, you have that text that I just read earlier, the Beatles story told for the first time in their own words and pictures. I also have some stickers here with price tags and such. Now, I will remove this it's quite used. As you can see, it's not in the best condition, but of course these kinds of sleeves rarely make it right through so much time. Even if they're kept properly, it's very difficult, especially if somebody took the book and read it. But even keeping them in the shelf, these can get damaged quite easily. You have some introductory words here on the side, and on the back, on the side of the last cover, you have also some quotes from each of the Beatles. But let's take this off for now. So, the Anthology book in all its glory. It's, as you can see, it has this pretty nice black, full black cover, which is actually a textile material with the Beatles words debossed and with this silver color. So it's a very nice combination, I think, black with silver. That's quite cool. You have this also on the spine, right? And the back is completely black. Now, I got this book, I read a few reviews of it, so I potentially knew a little bit of what I was expecting, but I didn't expect it to be this good, and I didn't want to read too many reviews. I just read some brief reviews that were just giving a little bit of details about why this book is great or not great or whatever, but I didn't watch video reviews. I tried to keep myself, and I wanted to just see it like I would have bought it for the first time in the 90s or 2000s actually, and I was quite impressed. First of all, it's huge. It does have almost 400 pages, if I'm not mistaken, or it's anyway, 350 pages, a little bit more than that. They are, as you see, big pages, so this is not a small book with 350 pages. And those pages, if you look at them, they don't have like huge text on them that would cover the page. They have section, okay, they have a lot of pictures and nice big pictures that you can see and collages of pictures and so on, as you can see for this one. But where you do have the text, and it's almost on all pages, right? At least, one of two pages will have text. Some of them have a lot of text, actually, especially, look, if you see in the beginning of the book, like, look at this. And the text is not that big, right? It's a fairly normal font, which means you have a lot of content in this book, really, to read. It's basically just a telling of the full Beatles story, as it is sort of on the documentary, with quotes from each of the Beatles sort of intertwined. It actually starts with each of them talking a little bit about their personal history, with John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and then Ringo Starr talking about where they were born, their parents, their childhood, and such. And this is happening separately in the first few chapters. But then afterwards, it just goes into their career and their group together. Of course, first of all, it was just Paul, John, and George, and other people as well involved, like Stuart Sutcliffe or Pete Best, and so on. And then Ringo joins them. And at that point, you can see that you can read their story with quotes from each of them intertwined in all of the chapters. And in some of the chapters, you will have other people as well pitching in, like Neil Aspinall, George Martin, and so on. So you kind of have some of those people around them also pitching in some information. But overall it's built very nicely, and it does flow. When you read it, you will not get bored. And the way that they put the pictures on the pages to complement the story that was being told in that section is done very, very well. I was really, really impressed with the work of editing this book, really, that people have put in. So while I'm talking about the book, I'm gonna show on the screen, pages from it, and I'm gonna stick a little bit on this page with the people who worked on the book, the editors, the designers, and so on, because I think, again, that I did a very good job. Now, the book itself, like I said, it starts, and the first 4 chapters are the 4 Beatles talking about their childhood, their early years. And then the book, as they move on to being a group, the book is split per year, so 2 years or 1 year or 3 years. And the first section, for instance, is from 1960 to 1962, and then you have 1963, 64, 65, and so on. So you'll have a section for these specific periods. And they are ending, of course, with 1970 or 1969, 1970, the last period of their career as a group. Near the end of the book, there are a few words by each Beatle again to kind of conclude their period together as a group and what it meant to them and what they think they meant to people. And then you have another section of indexes, credits to different people, details about the photographs, indexes for the photographs and so on. So yeah, it's one of the Beatles books that I think is one of the best that was built out there. I'm pretty much aware that most of this story is told through each Beatles' eyes, and so to some extent, in some pieces, it might be curated, right, to appear in such a book. But still, I think it's one of the best built portrayals of the Beatles' career as a group up until 1970. And in tandem or in combination with other books that are, let's say, less autobiographical and more external biographies, can paint quite a good picture of the evolution of these people together as a group during the 60s. Now, as you can see, this book is quite awesome. It has a lot of stuff in it. I feel again that the pictures and the words on the pages are really blending well together, and they will keep you entertained. I think you'll not get bored reading this. And if you couple that, with the music on the albums, it's a great experience. And the documentary also kind of adds to all of that. So yeah, it's one of the most comprehensive books, and as a collection with the anthology, I think it's one of the best built collections about the Beatles, with them involved as well, describing their life, their experiences, their music, and a lot of nice detail. Now, this about covers the anthology collection that I have, at least so far. Like I said, I'm looking into the vinyl. I'm hoping that there will be a Blu-ray release of the documentary and maybe some extra special features. But until then, I have to say that this is, again, a very well-built collection, a very well-built project, I think. It's no wonder that it had so much success, and it managed during the 90s to reignite the passion and love for the Beatles, and the interest as well in new generations. But at the same time, I have to say that I was very happy, like now in 2023, 2024, to be able to own these in such good condition. And let's look at it. I mean, the DVDs are 20 years old. The book is about 24 years old, and the CDs are almost 30 years old. So, they really stood the test of time, both in terms of the quality of the products themselves. They were probably also kept really well, but also in terms of the quality of the content. This concludes our anthology video for today. I'm really super interested to know what you think about these pieces of content that they released as part of the anthology project. Do you also feel like the book is one of the best Beatles books out there? For the albums, I'm super interested to know, for those of you who had a chance to listen or own the vinyl records and maybe also the CD ones, how do they fare compared to each other? So let us know all of those opinions in the comments. In the meantime, I've started working on a new series that will start to be released on the channel soon, which will be a comparative series for all of the Beatles albums. I'm not sure if I'm going to start. I want to start chronologically with Please Please Me, but I'm not sure if that's going to be possible. But I am going to look sequentially at all of the albums. I'm going to take all of the versions of the albums that I have on CD, vinyl, and some of the versions of the songs that are on those albums and are also on some of the compilations that I have, and try to present the differences between the different releases that I have on CD and vinyl, like I said, but also look a little bit into the sound and where do I think that each album or each album's songs sound better. That wraps it up for today. Please do like, share, and subscribe, especially subscribe if you like the content. Thank you very much for joining us, and I hope I'll see you next time.